Vinny Politan, great to have you with us here on Closing Arguments. We begin this hour in the low country of South Carolina. The Murdaugh family murders. Alec Murdaugh, part of a family that really was an institution in this part of South Carolina. They were the solicitors, the prosecutors for decades. The big law firm in town started 100 years ago by his great-grandfather. This guy had power, privilege, and everything. Now he's accused of murdering his wife and his own son. He says he has an alibi. We have huge news tonight relative to that alibi. Chanley Painter will join us in just a moment, but first, she has this story with the background, the story of the Murdaugh family murders.
Richard Alec Murdaugh, if that is your name, please raise your right hand. Do you waive reading of the indictments?
Yes, sir.
13 months after the deaths of his wife Maggie and son Paul, 64-year-old Alec Murdaugh stood handcuffed inside the Colleton County Courthouse and was formally arraigned on 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of possession of a deadly weapon in the commission of a violent crime.
What say you, Richard Alec Murdaugh? Are you guilty or not guilty of the felonies wherein you stand indicted?
Not guilty.
How shall you be tried?
By God and my country.
Richard Alec Murdaugh was born and raised in South Carolina's Low Country. He met his wife Maggie at the University of South Carolina, where she was a member of Kappa Delta sorority. They married in 1993. The next year, Alec graduated from law school. In 1996, Maggie gave birth to their first son, Buster. Paul was born 3 years later. Photos on Maggie's Facebook page show that Paul was an avid hunter and outdoorsman. It was Monday, June 7, 2021, when Maggie and Paul Murdaugh were found brutally shot behind this outbuilding on this sprawling 1,700-acre Murdaugh property. Alec Murdaugh told police he arrived after 9 p.m., found the bodies, and called 911.
Hampton County 911, where's your emergency?
This is Alec Murdaugh at 4147 Moselle Road. I need the police to answer immediately. My wife and child got badly.
It was just after 10 p.m. when Alec Murdaugh made his 911 call. It was raining. It took first responders almost 20 minutes to arrive at the remote location.
It's 4147 Moselle Road. I've been up to it now. It's bad.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay, and are they breathing?
No, ma'am.
Okay, and you said it's your wife and your son?
My wife and my son.
Police documents show that less than a minute after the crime scene was secured, responding officers requested that the coroner be notified. According to the indictment, Maggie Murdaugh was shot with a rifle and Paul Murdaugh was killed with a shotgun. Alec Murdaugh is known to own both types of weapons. Standing outside the front gate of the Murdaugh estate more than a year after the murders, the grounds are overgrown, but it's so peaceful and quiet here in this rural area, standing in stark contrast to the chaos of June 7th, 2021. A 2-lane road runs by the Murdaugh property on Moselle Road. The area around it, woods and low-lying wetlands. The shooting deaths of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh threw a spotlight on the rural counties that make up the 14th Judicial Circuit in South Carolina's Low Country, where the Murdaugh name is well known.
Everybody knows the Murdaughs. You know, it's a household name that's been here forever.
For 87 consecutive years, 3 generations of Murdaughs served as the solicitor, which, like a district attorney, is the area's top prosecutor. But Alec broke with the family tradition and stayed in private practice instead of pursuing a career of public service.
When you have a family that is so powerful and has so much influence, it's easy to go off the rails a little bit.
Alec Murdaugh reportedly gave investigators an ironclad alibi, saying that he was here at his parents' home in Barnville, South Carolina, around the time of the murders, less than 13 miles from the crime scene.
He was with his mother, who has dementia, about 20 minutes. Yeah, he was with her about 20 minutes from Moselle.
Okay, so He has an alibi, but his alibi witness, I don't think, would be able to testify.
Murdaugh's defense team is asking for a speedy trial and say that Alec had nothing to do with the deaths of his wife and son.
Big news tonight relative to that alibi. Let's bring in Court TV legal correspondent Chanley Painter. Chanley, what can you tell us?
Well, Vinny, with the pleadings that are going back and forth in this case file since he was indicted for murder, we're learning some new details, some confirmed details about the possible evidence prosecutors have against him. Before this, we were only learning from leaks or anonymous sources. But this latest defense motion talks about a recording on Paul Murdaugh's cell phone the night he was murdered. Now, the defense motion is focusing on what they're complaining about leaks from the prosecutor's office, Vinny, and they're saying that's an example, and that prosecutors showed this recording to family members of the Murdaughs, and they told defense what was shown. So here's what the motion says. It says, on the recording, Paul is taking a video of his friend's dog, who Paul was concerned about. Apparently, a conversation between Maggie, Paul, and Alec is also captured on this recording. Family members report that Maggie, Paul, and Alec are having a convivial conversation about the behavior of their own dog, Buddha. There is absolutely no indication of a disagreement or dispute between Paul, Maggie, and Alec, according to family members who viewed the recording. And however, the state contends that within minutes after this convivial, lighthearted conversation, Alec Murdaugh murdered both Maggie and Paul for no apparent reason. So if this is in fact a video moments before the shooting, Vinny, which phone records could show and confirm when this was made, remember the bodies were found near dog kennels on that property, then this would really blow a hole in the alibi that his brothers told Good Morning America after Maggie and Paul were found, which is that he was visiting his father, who died of cancer a few days after the murders, in Savannah, Georgia, then went to his parents' home in Varnville, South Carolina, before going to Moselle and discovering the bodies, calling 911. So that's how it looks on the map there. Savannah, over an hour away from Varnville, where I've been to his mother's home, where she lives. That's about 20 minutes or so to the hunting lodge in Colleton County.
That alibi makes no sense now, because if he's on the recording speaking, and this is also news to me, we thought maybe just the son was there and Alec didn't know his son was on the property, and there's an argument with his wife and he kills his wife, but then, oh my goodness, there's a witness. No, apparently, if they're all speaking, he knows they're both there.
Right.
This turns into a premeditated double execution of his wife and son, and takes his alibi and blows it up, because there's no way he's speaking with them and then going to visit his father and then come. That would make no sense whatsoever. Wow, this is huge. Chanley Painter, Court TV legal correspondent, thank you so much. This is unbelievably damaging, I think, to his case. I mean, his case is his alibi. I didn't do it, I wasn't there. Let's bring in my think tank. Joining me tonight in Atlanta, Georgia, criminal defense attorney, former federal prosecutor, law professor at Texas Southern University, Michael Sterling is with us. All the way across the country in Seattle, Washington, trial attorney Ann Bremner. And down south in West Palm Beach, Florida, former police lieutenant, trial attorney Rick King. Great to see everyone tonight. Michael Sterling, I'll begin with you. You're right next to me here. If that alibi goes away, that defense goes away. Come on, if you're telling me you're somewhere else and we've got a video that has a recording of you talking to the two victims, come on.
Well, Benny, the defense doesn't start until the first witness is presented. So it doesn't matter what we say or what the defense attorneys say now. It only matters what happens between the lines in the jury and what evidence is presented in a court of law. So it looks like, at least from I believe that was a defense filing that Chanley just talked about. It looks like there might be a change of strategy. And I'm not trying to predict what the defense is going to argue. And I often tell prosecutors, don't try to predict what I'm going to argue when they're telling the judge he's going to say this or he's going to say that. Don't try to predict what I'm going to say. You don't know what I'm going to do. But it seems like there might be a little change of strategy here to say, you know, here's this guy having this jovial moment with his family, this lighthearted moment. And to suggest that he goes in an instant from this lighthearted moment with his family to a cold-blooded murder is to disbelieve the obvious, which is that this was a loving father and someone who was having a lighthearted moment with his family. And then obviously they're alleging that somebody else did this brutal murder.
Yeah, here's the problem, man, Bremner, for Alec Murdaugh. He makes the 911 call. I mean, we heard his high-pitched voice in that 911 call, making the call to 911. Like, we know that. So he is the one discovering the bodies. But the bodies he's discovering are the two people he's on a recording talking with. And they're talking about the dog, and he's found at the kennel. This is, I don't know what the new strategy would be, but it seems the alibi could be out the door at this point, and I don't know what the explanation is. I'm there talking with him, then I leave, and then I come back, and I'm, oh my God, what happened?
I mean, I'm with you. I'm like flummoxed by this, Vinny. I mean, what are they doing? Is he leading the defense and saying, this is great stuff? We were friendly and talking about the dogs. I mean, they're with the dogs, they're at the kennel, you know, and he finds the bodies with that high-pitched 911 call. And am I wrong on this? Weren't the folks, his father and another witness, both suffering from Alzheimer's anyway? So there was some issue there with respect to whether they could be competent to say anything. But of course, now his father is tragically gone. But where does that leave us? It leaves him smack in the middle of the crime scene, reporting it, and being there right before the deaths occurred. You know, it's a lot of circumstantial evidence, in my opinion.
And Rick, it seems that for prosecutors, you've just got to tighten up the digital footprint, right? Placing the phone at a certain time in a certain place becomes crucial here, because I mean, it's his voice and it's the two victims' voices on that recording.
But Vinny, from all the coverage that you've done on this network, you know those digital footprints are coming anyway. You know the prosecutors are already looking to put those cell phones in places where we could identify and say, hey, this is where you were at this time. So you know that was coming. But now with this recording and this extra evidence that really blows up whatever defense they were trying to put together with this alibi being at his father's, that's really kind of by the wayside now. And I wouldn't want to predict what their defense is. I agree with Michael in that sense. I don't try to predict what the defense is, but it certainly can't be that any longer, that's for sure.
I know. So, Michael, again, we're not predicting, but do you think one avenue they need to explore is to try to take that digital evidence and find out a way for this jury not to believe it, that it's somehow tainted, unreliable, whatever? Because if they hear those voices and they believe it's recorded at a certain time, that is such a problem.
And then that might justify the change in strategy. We don't have access to the discovery, but if the digital footprint triangulates him at the house and not at his father's house, then perhaps the defense said to themselves, we better come up with something else, right? So, and this might justify the change in strategy. He had to be at the home, but maybe he was somewhere else. It's a huge house, huge property. Maybe he was somewhere else when this happened, and then he comes out of nowhere and discovers this moments later. We don't have access to the discovery, but as we try to think through these issues together, it seems like that might be why there's a change in strategy, because perhaps the digital footprint expert has said the same thing, and they looked at the evidence and saw, hey, we're not going to be able to say you're at your father's house because we've got you using your cell phone in the area of your home.
And I think what may be the most compelling part of this evidence is it may be sort of obvious that he wouldn't have known that the recording existed. So, you know, you put together a couple things, a timeline, right? When is the recording made? When is the 911 call made? And that's the beginning of our timeline, and you fill it in. But what statements did he make about where he was in between those two times? And how does that jive with where he could have been and what he could have done?
Well, absolutely. You know, I keep thinking of this guy, he's almost like a serial killer, Vinny. I mean, with all of the crimes he's got at his feet or at his hands, or however you want to say it or see it, So when I listen to this new evidence, I still can't think of a reason why they would want to go down this road, frankly. I mean, a happy dog conversation, that's so juxtaposed to these horrific murders of his own child, his own wife, and others, everybody that comes in his path, really, and he's just remorseless. So this kind of a conversation, to me, is just so trivial, doesn't help him in any way, only hurts him. I still keep wondering, is he playing lawyer in his own defense? I mean, I kind of get that sense when I hear this kind of thing.
I think that will absolutely be an issue with him. He's had his way for years. He's been very powerful. Rick, and then the final note on this story tonight, to me, is for the first time, I'm understanding that he had a conversation with his son. At first, I was thinking that maybe it was between him and his wife, and he didn't know that his son was there, and then there was a witness, and then things got out of control. But it's very clear from that recording that he knows who's there. Prosecutors can clearly argue premeditated murder, double execution style.
Yeah, the details of this case just took a turn for the worse. Not that they were any good in the beginning, but to think that this man plotted out and killed with premeditation his wife and his young son. I think that with the evidence they have right now, the defense is moving towards somebody else did it. That's the only thing that they can do, and they have to somehow overcome the metadata that's going to be within that recording and the time frame of the 911. And I don't think it's going to be a difficult hurdle to jump.